welcome to episode 141 of the CRICKETher Weekly. In just a few hours' time, Sid, England's series against the West Indies will be starting. Now, as Will Macpherson wrote in the Telegraph, it's been a bit of an odd one because it's been such a quiet build-up. It feels like there's not been a huge amount of song and dance about it, but you know, we will try and be watching by hook or by crook, whatever means possible. Probably via BT Sport.
Yeah, we believe it's going to be on BT Sport in some way or another. We're told it should be available online if you get an online subscription. If you're on Sky, it'll be on your red button. And if you're one of the 3 people in the country that actually bought one of BT's own TV boxes, then it'll be on like Channel 5, BT Sport 5.
Okay.
So, yeah, be there or be...
Be a triangle.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, Sid, what we should really be talking about is we've got a new coach, and there's going to be possibly, or not, a new ODI leading 11, and so we need to talk about what our 11 would be for that first ODI England against the West Indies. And Heather is obviously back, and she hasn't been playing for a while, so they're going to have to do some rejigging, aren't they?
They are, and the key thing really is that with both Heather and Natsiva back, and you obviously want both of them in your first 11. It's the Capsey Conundrum, which sounds like a Sherlock Holmes tale, but it's what John Lewis is faced with.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how do you fit Alice Capsey into that 11? How do you? What's your answer to the Capsey Conundrum, Raf?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? And I wonder whether, one answer would be that you play one less bowler, perhaps, given that Capsey gives you some bowling cover. So if we
and
think
of course,
about,
Natsiva will bring back some bowling of her own.
That's true, and also Heather Knight in her press conference this week said that she is fit to bowl now.
Okay.
So that gives you a little bit of cover, although you probably don't want to bowl her too much because she's just coming back from injury, etc, etc. So potentially you've got a top 7 of Beaumont, Lamb. We'd probably slot in Capsey at 3. Is that fair? Because that's where she's been batting in the 100 and in the
sort of place.
Regional competitions. And then Heather Knight and Natsiva at 4 and 5. Sophia Dunkley at 6, so she's dropping down. And then Amy Jones after that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, I think.
So that's your top 7.
Yeah, I think you do. You definitely need to find that place for Alice Capsey. Obviously, she played in the ODIs against India. That was it. Nearly forgot who we were playing. But of course, that was without Heather Knight and Natsiva. So it's like, how do you fit her back into that team with those 2 players back? But I think it is really important. And I think it's also really important for me that she bats higher up the order and she doesn't end up, coming in at 7, because I just think that that's a waste, and that's not what England want her to be playing in the short term or the long term. So I'd like to see her batting, quite high up. And I think three's the right place for me. Now, what about the bowling, Raf? What are you thinking? Obviously Sophie Eccleston, is perhaps actually the first name on the team sheet, even before Heather Knight herself. Charlie Dean, do you think she's going to get a nod today?
Well, I think I listened in on the Heather Knight press conference, and she said that from what they've been seeing out there, the pitches are likely to be slow and conducive to spin. So it would make sense probably to play your 2 frontline spinners, so that would be Eccleston and Charlie Dean. So I suspect that Charlie Dean may play, although I think I tweeted during the series against India, it's actually really disappointing that Charlie Dean can bat so well and then not get a place in the top 6 in the batting lineup. But it's just so difficult to see how kind of you make way for her. In the similar vein, we might think, it would be great to have Lauren Winfield-Hill back in that top order, but she's only in the squad for the T20s, and also Heather Knight in her press conference basically said, we've picked her because she's a good backup keeping option, as we were talking about I think last week. That might be one of the reasons why she's been selected. So Anyway, I've gone off the tangent here. I was meant to be talking about the bowling, Sid. So
Yeah, what about your fast bowling options? So
Yeah.
we've got a couple of spots left. Who's your number one? Who's opening your bowling? 'Cause
well, if it was being done on form, Sid, I know who my answer would be, because I'm afraid that some of our younger bowlers did rather get taken to pieces in the ODI series against India in September, and then we got to Lords, and of course everything that happened when England were bowling was slightly overshadowed by a small
the thing.
incident that took place at the end of the game, to
the
which
thing
I
we
won't
shall
refer.
not mention.
But actually, the two opening bowlers on that occasion managed to inject some control back into proceedings and really put England in a position where the batters should have won them the game. And those two opening bowlers were Kate Cross and Freya Davies.
Okay, so that's who we're probably expecting to see today.
Well, if it's being done on form, that's what I'd be doing. I don't know whether I would go as far as to say I expect that to happen, because the idea that John Lewis or anyone in the England camp pays any attention to me whatsoever.
He's tuning in right now, Raf. Hi, John. Hope you're doing okay out there.
Yeah, have a great time in the sun.
Enjoying your first couple of weeks.
Enjoy the beaches. Anyway, that's what I'd be doing. I think perhaps it's more likely that what we'll see is a bit of a rotation of the bowlers, because John Lewis will want to get an eye on everybody. He'll want to familiarise himself with everybody, won't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that England, the main thing is that there's options because of having Capsey and Siver in that 11. It does mean that you can go down to 4 bowlers, have a long batting lineup, but then rotate those bowlers. So yeah, hopefully we'll see some different names appearing throughout this ODI series, because it's a really important one. Don't forget that England win this. They need to get 6 points on the board really in terms of their ICC Championship ambitions. They don't want to fall further behind.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, on recent form, England against the West Indies, you'd have to say that we would expect England to win all 3 of these ODIs with one hand tied behind their backs. Sorry to say it. So I'll be really surprised if England don't win all of the matches. And actually, to that extent, you go, okay, well, whoever gets picked, be that a batter or a bowler, they're just you would hope that they would fill their boots. So it's a real chance for people to enhance their reputation. But then again, it's also unlucky for those who miss out, because you go, okay, well, somebody might come in and take 5 or 6 wickets, but who knows that the next bowler who isn't quite in the starting 11 might not have done the same thing, because we're talking about a weak batting lineup, I'm afraid. I believe that Stephanie Taylor is having to sit out this series because of injury.
She won't be playing.
Deandra Dottin is not in the West Indies 11 anymore because she's retired. So you've got Hayley Matthews. That's your batting.
Yep.
So it could be a tough one for the West Indies. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe this time next week I'll be eating my hat, Sid. Who knows? Okay. Now, we did also have a Heather press conference this week, which I've already alluded to.
What else did she have to say, Raf? What did she have to say about the vice-captaincy?
Yeah,
let's drag the big one out the bag.
That was the big one, wasn't it? It was one of those, well, I'm going to tell you who it is, but it's embargoed for another couple of hours. And in the end, the new vice-captain is Amy Jones. Oh, sorry, I ruined that. Should we try that one again, Sid?
It's fine.
It's Amy Jones. Is the new vice-captain. Bit of a surprise.
I mean, but my first reaction of it is like, whoosh. That was the sound of succession planning going out the window. I mean, you've appointed as your vice-captain somebody who has made it really clear she doesn't want to be captain, and who struggled in the job when she did the captaincy job. I mean, obviously she's not. The expectation is that she won't have to do very much because Heather's going to be the captain and back in full-time charge. But I think there's the issue of succession planning that what they're saying is, well, we're yet again going to appoint a vice captain that's no threat whatsoever to Heather Knight. That's someone that everybody knows is never going to be the long-term captain.
Doesn't want it.
Doesn't want it. So it means that we have to hang on to Heather because we don't have anybody else lined up,
absolutely.
And I think that just feels really disappointing. And then there was also they said something really odd about Nat Siver, didn't they, Ralph?
Well, it does feel a bit strange. They kind of said, they almost don't want it to be portrayed as a negative against Siver that she isn't going to be vice captain anymore, and they don't want headlines saying, "Oh, Nat Siver demoted." But I think they've handled it kind of badly. They've sort of gone, "Oh well, she doesn't want to be vice captain for this series because she's just coming back to cricket after her break for mental health reasons," which is absolutely fair enough. But then they've kind of said, oh, but she might pick up a leadership role later on, and she's still really keen to do a leadership role at some point. And I think that's really odd, because it totally undermines Amy Jones. It's basically saying, well, we're giving you this role on a very temporary basis, and only because the person who we kind of really want to do it, Nat Siver, doesn't want it at the moment. And
we don't want to give it to anybody younger, because we
Yeah.
don't want to risk anointing a future captain that's potentially... I mean, I'm sorry, but the way it looks is that we don't want to risk anointing a future captain that's potentially a threat to Heather.
So it's very odd, and it just feels like they haven't really learned anything from their recent brush with, oh my goodness, Heather Knight isn't around because she's got injured, as people do when they're playing professional cricket, and we had to scrabble around to find a replacement. So what are we going to do? We're going to do exactly the same thing we did before, and as you say, throw succession planning out of the window as a concept. So yeah, a bit of an odd one. You sort of wonder whether maybe it's John Lewis sort of keeping his powder dry and thinking maybe he'll review everything this series and see how it goes. But then why did they need to appoint a vice captain at all in that case? Because you don't need a vice captain if you've got Heather there, as you say. The vice captain isn't really going to be doing anything, so just don't have a vice captain for this series.
Make it on a very game by game informal basis.
And then John Lewis can pick his own vice captain in January ahead of the World Cup once he's got the measure of everybody. But the way they've done it, it's a bit weird.
Just feels odd.
Yeah. Okay, so that's international stuff for this week. We've also had a big announcement this week, though, Sid, about domestic cricket.
And it is a big announcement, isn't it? Because domestic cricket is getting bigger.
Yeah.
So we had an announcement 3 or 4 weeks ago saying that there were going to be a lot more professional players. We hadn't really been expecting that, because we'd been expecting them to retrench, given that the economy in this country, things are not going well. Mm-hmm. If you're here, you know that. If you're not here, you probably also know that, because you've probably seen some news about it.
Yeah.
But they did it. And now they've come out and said they're basically going to pretty much double the number of domestic fixtures for next year. So with all these professionals, I think it's fantastic news. What are the figures, Raf? What are they actually going to be doing? So
the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy, the 50 over competition, is going to be expanded so that teams play each other home and away. So doubling the number of fixtures. And the Charlotte Edwards Cup is also expanding. All of the teams are going to be playing all of the other teams. So previously we'd had it in 2 groups and you played everyone in your group. And now it's going to be everyone playing everyone. So again, a kind of doubling of the fixtures.
More matches and a bit of more sense, but the group thing was a bit weird, especially as the way they ended up with only one semi-final, but they still used the group thing, so you had to combine points across both groups as well as looking at the group winners. Yeah. But yeah, overall, I think that's fantastic news. I think the players need to play cricket, and that's kind of a slightly strange thing to say, because we've talked a lot about workloads in this country particularly. We've talked about workloads in cricket in general. It's been a big theme in the men's game as well. And it's been a theme in our game, with Nat Siver and Catherine Brunt both taking time out because they had such big workloads. But for the domestic players, for a long, long time in domestic cricket, you played 10 games a year and that was it. And, we're now pushing towards the point where people are going to be playing close to 30 games a year if you're just a domestic player. And that's probably that's a good, healthy number, I think. It's not a number that's going to cause people to break down and to bowl too many overs or to get tired, hopefully. But it'll give them plenty of time in the middle to improve their cricket, because nothing improves your cricket like time playing competitive matches and being in the middle of a field.
I think on that, if you're an England player, then obviously you're playing a lot more cricket. But as you say, now we've got all of these domestic professionals. They need to be playing cricket, and they need also to be. It needs to be meaningful competition.
It's like having a dog, but not taking it for a walk, Raf.
What an
if you
odd
have a
metaphor!
Dog, you need to take it for a walk.
What
if
a
you
very
have players,
odd metaphor!
You need to be taking them for
it for a walk around the cricket pitch. Okay, Sid. I feel a tiny bit conflicted about this, in the sense of, I think we have to now admit that this is the death knell now for women's county cricket, in terms of it being anything other than a recreational competition. And I don't think that's really been acknowledged by anybody, because people are looking at it from the perspective of the regional professionals and going, this is really brilliant. But actually, we'd previously tried to argue on CRICKETher that the regions were viewing county cricket at that start of the season moment as being really important. important for who they selected. And actually, you know, the regional season is now starting in April. It's really incredibly unlikely that any of the regional players, and certainly none of the England players, will be playing any county cricket from here on in. Tammy Beaumont can, you know, whistle for Kent all she likes, but she's not going to be playing for them unless she's dropped by England and her region, the Blaze, which isn't going to happen. I just feel slightly sad about it from that perspective.
Maintain some importance as a sort of feeder thing, and what the regions are going to have to do is they're actually going to have to continue to send people to watch county cricket, because they're going to need to take players from that setup.
Yeah.
You know, yes, some players will come through your youth system even, but other players, you know, there are going to be some gems in there that you'll want to look at. So hopefully the regions will continue to look to county cricket as a way of feeding into, you know, their core playing people over the next few years. But it's just going to be more of a long-term process. But overall...
the other interesting thing about this is that 20 of the Charlotte Edwards Cup games are going to be double headers with the men's T20 Blast. So we saw a few double headers this season, but it's massively expanding. And I guess what the ECB, it feels like what they're trying to do is piggyback on the success of the 100 and go, okay, well, we know that double headers bring more people to women's cricket, so we're going to try and replicate that in regional cricket, whereby at the moment we're getting really poor crowds.
Yeah, hopefully, and hopefully maybe the chance as well. I hope that Sky will be encouraged to show some of those games on the telly as well, because, you know, the more games that they're put in front of people. I mean, you know, if you're Sky, hopefully it's free content, and, you know, they're increasingly forced to acknowledge that it's good quality content.
Yeah.
We've moved on a long way from when, you know, Sky. I don't think anybody actually publicly came out and said this at the time, but I think that we can probably say it now, you know, safely 3 or 4 years later, that 3 or 4 years later Sky executives were saying they didn't want to show it because they didn't consider it good enough quality. They didn't consider domestic cricket good enough quality to put on their screens.
Well, that was one of the reasons why so few of the original Kia Super League matches were on TV, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's a matter of public record yet, but hey, it is now.
It is now.
One other thing about the domestic schedule that we might want to talk about briefly is the fact that the Rachel Hayhoe Flint final has now been moved. It was at Lord's in September. Approximately 20 people attended. It's now been moved back to Northampton, where it was in 2021. So
yeah, it's a pity, isn't it? One way. I mean, it almost feels like that, though, like that there were actually more people in Northampton, and I mean, it was certainly a lot fuller. And you know, I enjoyed that day in Northampton. I didn't enjoy the day at Lord's quite so much as a Vipers fan.
Oh, I see. So that's why it's being moved back. It's a Vipers takeover.
So, you know.
That's a hell of a conspiracy theory there, Sid, that you've got going on. I don't think Charlotte Edwards has got that much influence.
Oh, I don't know, Raph. No, but seriously, the Lord's thing ultimately this time didn't work, and it was practically empty. And you know, we said at the time that they should have, for instance, sold one ticket for both matches and given away the RHF final tickets.
It was marketed terribly. It should have been marketed as a weekend of women's cricket. You come to one, you come to the other.
Yeah.
And you know, come for one, stay for the next one. There was nothing. Nobody knew it was happening. It was actually quite disgraceful, the lack of marketing.
Yeah, so it does feel a little bit like they've gone, well, we made no effort and nobody came.
Yeah, so now it's justified that we move it back to Northampton.
But, you know, we love Northampton.
Do we?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I mean...
The scene of many the Vipers' triumph, Raph.
Oh, well, as long as you're happy, Sid, then that's fine.
There we go.
A happy husband makes a happy home or something. Yeah, it's an interesting one, but hey-ho. Well, we will be at Northampton in September, hopefully.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Great. Let's wrap up there, Sid. Thanks so much for tuning in, as ever. Bye for now.
Bye.